Hello Movie Mavens! Welcome back to another video on the B Movies channel. My name is Bailey and I put the B in movies. If you are new to our channel, hello. The B Movies channel is a continuation of the B Movies blog, which is just bmovies.blog. It's always linked below. And so over here we talk about the different pieces you can find on our blog. We drop pieces Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. CST. We also do a bite-sized Sunday review over on our Instagram, which is at bmovies channel, same as our YouTube, where it's a more palatable bite-sized little review of a piece of content that I want to talk about, but I don't think has enough meat for a piece. And we talk about all kinds of stuff. We talk about analog horror series, we talk about horror ARGs, we do a deep dive on one of our pieces from the week, and so just welcome. Welcome, we're happy to have you here in our little group of movie mavens. That's us. And if you're wondering why I'm saying us, but it's just me, B Movies is run by me and one of my best friends, Elliot, who is on the editorial side. She's my collaborator, she's one of my ride or dies, and I love her dearly. So, this week, I've decided to call my little rambles up top Bailey Babbles. So, feel free to skip ahead just a little bit if you don't want to hear the Bailey Babbles for this week. But first up in Bailey Babbles, this is the last video with my hair this long. So in the next video, I'm going to cut like 8 to 10 inches off. I've just decided that with the Love is a Working Title series that I'm doing on my personal blog, which if you haven't read them, they're at nobodyputsbaileyinthecorner.wordpress.com. With getting those stories out, with over a year of B Movies blog under my belt, with 30, this is our 30th YouTube video, with 30 YouTube videos under our belt, I just feel like it's time for a new era. So I'm super excited to get my hair cut. I don't know about y'all who have long hair, but nothing feels better than that first feeling when just all of your hair is gone, like after you've decided to cut it. And also for those who have endured their fair share of bad haircuts like I have, just remember hair always grows back. So I'm excited to have that free feeling. Also, this may be a little bit shorter. I know last week we had like a 70-minute video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. That was a lot of fun to record too. By the way, I had a blast doing that, writing that script and doing all that research. This one may be a little bit shorter just because, at least with like the analog horror series and horror ARGs that we cover, there aren't a lot of updates. It's a little bit quiet this week. So I'm sure updates are coming, but don't worry. I still have some things to talk about, including our blog roundup, which it's officially time for. I think that's all we have in the Bailey Babbles for today. Again, it's just a shorter video this week. I'm running on caffeine and adrenaline and sloppy joes. So I guess the Bailey Babbles have simmered down for today. We all know, if you're new here, I tend to get on soapboxes and ramble sometimes up at the top of the video. But that's all I really have to say. This is the last video with my hair this long. So get ready for a change next week. I'm ready for a change. Yeah. So let's dive in. So our blog roundup, like I mentioned up top, we drop pieces 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. CST. During October, we do 6. It's crazy, but it's my favorite time of the year. It's Ellie's favorite time of the year. So this week over on the B Movies blog, on Monday, we talked about what I deemed midnight specials. I have insomnia. It's basically anxiety-induced insomnia. And so I get that on sleepless nights, it's like that scene in Fight Club where he's like, you're never awake, you're never really asleep, and he's just like flipping through infomercials. So I compiled some show recs that are good for if you're up late and you want to have something on in the background, or you're trying to go to sleep and you want something you can kind of come in and out of. Have some ideas for you, don't worry. On Tuesday, we talked about forgotten game shows. It should not surprise anybody. I watched a ton of game shows as a kid. I watched them with my grandfather, who I miss dearly. And I just remembered some hidden gems and decided to unearth those and bring them back into the spotlight. On Wednesday, we talked about 2 Sentence Horror, both the TV show and the subreddit. I have some of my favorite bad ones in there. I have some of my favorite good ones, as well as an episode guide if you're wondering where to start within the 2-sentence horror show. And then yesterday, I did my brief history on Adult Swim. If you're not familiar, we're doing a 3-piece series on Adult Swim. The infomercials piece is out. This was the second piece, which is a history of Adult Swim, and then the third piece will be on Alan Resnick, because he needed his own piece. His work just needs its own piece, because there's so much to talk about. So this is the second piece. I will link both pieces in the description box below, don't worry, and that's going to be our deep dive today. And then today, we did a spotlight on Tim Curry. If you're like me, I grew up with Tim Curry movies, from Rocky Horror Picture Show to Clue, which is still, which I still, obviously to this day, I'm 31 years old, I love Rocky Horror Picture Show. I love Clue. It still makes me laugh to this day. He was Rooster in Annie, he's in Legion, he's in Muppet Treasure Island. There's just so much content that he's in, and so many staple childhood movies that I know are not only staple movies for me, but for other people, and I just wanted to give him a little bit of a spotlight. So just to recap, this week on the B-Movies blog, you have midnight specials, forgotten game shows, 2-sentence horror, a brief history of Adult Swim, and a Tim Curry spotlight, all waiting for you over on just bmovies.blog, which is also linked below. So next up, we have our Bite Size Sunday. Again, like I said earlier in the video, every Sunday around 8 or 9 a.m. CST over on our Instagram at bmovies channel, just same as our YouTube. I drop a review. There's just a few sentences, maybe a couple short paragraphs about a show, a music video, really anything that I've watched and I want to talk about, but again, I don't feel like I have enough to say for a full piece. And here on YouTube exclusively, you get a hint on Friday as to what the Bite Size Sunday is going to be for this week. And by hint, I mean it's very cryptic clues to decipher. And so this week, the Bite Size Sunday clue is, in the words of Liz Lemon, Mandy, is that a guy friend like Mandy Patinkin? So just kind of think about what content has come out recently that has Mandy Patinkin in it, and you should be able to connect the dots. So that is our Bite Size Sunday teaser. So let's go ahead and get into our deep dive for the week. So like I said, I'm doing a 3-part series on Adult Swim because there's so much to unpack with Adult Swim, right? You have the infomercials in and of themselves. There's 33 of them. I watched all of them. Again, I will link that piece below as well. Watched all 3 of them, gave my favorites, and that was a whole big beast of a piece. So this one is just a brief history of Adult Swim. It's not a comprehensive history. Please know that this is the Cliff Notes version of the history of Adult Swim. I just wanted to hit the big points and just honestly pay tribute to something that I know, at least for me, Adult Swim shaped a lot of my humor now as an adult. Space Ghost Coast to Coast is still, to this day, one of my favorite shows of all time. I quote it all the time, whether people get it or not. And I just wanted, I guess, to kind of pay my respects at the altar of Adult Swim. So, settle in, get cozy, and I'm going to give you just a brief timeline of Adult Swim and how it came to be this pop culture phenom that we all know and love. So, Adult Swim started, and it wasn't Adult Swim at the time, obviously, but it got its roots in 1994 when Mike Lazo and co. introduced one of my favorite shows of all time to the world, Space Ghost Coast to Coast. And this is also where, and I'm sure if you watch Adult Swim, you can see the white title card with the flowing building and hear that doot for William Street Productions, which at the time was Ghost Planet Industries, when they started out with their inaugural show, Space Ghost Coast to Coast. And this is where they found their roots and kind of came into play. And William Street Productions produces or has their hands in a lot of the shows at Adult Swim. So Space Ghost Coast to Coast obviously found its audience, and it led to other... For those who don't know, Space Ghost Coast to Coast is dubbed over and repurposed animation from the show from the 60s. And so, in that same vein, C-Lab 2021 was spawned. And then Space Ghost Coast to Coast, for those who don't know, also is how Aqua Teen Hunger Force came to fruition. Because if you remember the Baffler Meal episode, that's basically a backdoor pilot for Aqua Teen Hunger Force. And then, things grew into reimagining beloved characters like Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, where a lot of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons were molded into something different. I would argue that these things were really influential to shows like BoJack Horseman, because there are very similar vibes, in my opinion. I don't know that for sure, but I think a lot of the cartoons, like a lot of the offbeat cartoons that we've grown to know and love, really were inspired by a lot of these Adult Swim cartoons. I digress. So, in the first official programming block, it seemed to have arrived in 2001. It seems like there were some difficulties and some back and forth around how things would go for a while, but in 2001, Adult Swim premiered. Like the Adult Swim block as we know it. And this block included shows like Home Videos and Cowboy Bebop. And see, I should also mention Toonami existed back in the 90s as well, is where Toonami got its roots. And 2001 is also where we started to see very early iterations of the Adult Swim bumpers that we've all come to know and love. Like, as a marketing girly, their marketing is next level. If you've never seen the billboard where they truly made a billboard that is the Slack message from a stakeholder asking for a billboard for something, and the billboard is just the Slack it's so good. It's so good. But anyway, this is where the bumpers started, because if you remember, and I included one in the piece, it's like the older people in the pool, and it says that Adult Swim started. So this is where the bumpers first started making headway, and first started, really, it's when Adult Swim really became more defined. And then in the mid-2000s, Adult Swim started picking up canceled series like The Oblongs, Family Guy, which is crazy now to think about how many times Family Guy and Futurama were canceled. But they would pick up these canceled shows and start adding them to their programming block. And, I truly believe, I don't know the exact thought process of what happened, but I do think that Adult Swim did get a lot of these shows resurrected and did give a lot of these shows a chance, because it proved that there was a viewership for them. And obviously, I was not there for that full conversation, but that's what I would assume. And then Adult Swim, obviously, throughout the aughts and I don't know what we call the 2010s, they would go on to house beloved shows like The Eric Andre Show, Loiter Squad, Robot Chicken, all of the Tim and Eric properties, The Boondocks. There are so many shows just swirling around in my head. And they just became this hub for weird, delightful, experimental, diverse content that you don't really see anywhere else. The only thing, when I was writing this piece, the only other thing I could think of, and this is definitely going to be its own piece, the only thing I could think of that even kind of paralleled Adult Swim would be Fuse. For those who remember Fuse, like the Nighttime Clap, Pants Off, Dance Off, just weird, that's where The Whitest Kids You Know first aired, which I know I love a lot of The Whitest Kids You Know sketch, but there are also a lot of problematic sketches, I know, because of the time frame it came out in. Please know, I fully understand that. But Fuse is the only other thing I could think of that really had the same feel. And, Fuse showed music videos 90% of the time. This was just, the nighttime stuff that came on, or, some reruns that would run on Fuse. And it just created this space where, I don't know the full process, but it just, to me, as a viewer, it just created this space and hub of content that you didn't see anywhere else, and that I really connected with as a kid who can sometimes have an absurdist sense of humor. And, I think that if Netflix didn't exist, like, for example, I think You Should Leave would absolutely live on Adult Swim. If cable were still a thing, for sure. Could see that living there. And there are some other series as well. I'm sure you can think of some that would live really well within the Adult Swim programming block. And so then in 2013, as we know from the infomercials piece, that's when Adult Swim, even though technically that infomercial that H. John Benjamin and David Cross wrote in 2009, I believe, the vitamin one, we know that that was just the beginning, but then infomercials began regularly running in 2013. And again, you can check out my piece on them because I watched all 33 of them. And then that kind of brings us to today. So Max hosts most of Adult Swim's content now. I know that there are probably a couple things missing, but most of it is readily available on demand. But personally, I miss the days where I would stay up way past my bedtime in middle school and high school, just seeing what treasures would unfold on Adult Swim, because even though they had that programming block, you never knew what you were going to get. And we got things like unedited footage of a bear. They would always do the April Fool's pranks, where sometimes they would preview new content, but it would all be on a fast forward, so you would be watching it at like 8 times the speed. And it's just this magical little place. And I know that cable is changing, streaming's changing, and I mean, honestly, streaming is slowly reverting back to cable with all of the mergers of different platforms. But Adult Swim will just always have a special place in my heart. And like I mentioned earlier, it's just responsible for forming so much of my humor. And probably, I would be so bold as to say, some of my writing, especially my comedic writing. And I just think it's this wonderful, weird little hub for creators to share their content with the world. So thank you, Adult Swim. That's a very brief history of Adult Swim, and I will link the piece below so you can read everything else with it. So that concludes this week's deep dive. So now let's hop into special features. In special features, we talk about updates on our favorite analog horror series, horror ARGs, or sometimes just discussion topics that I may not write about on the blog, or I haven't figured out the angle for quite yet. It's just kind of a cool little catch-all section of this video. So let's go ahead and get started this week with Detective View. And I did mention this last week. So BB Key, who also is the creator of Not Your Normal Kid Show, which we've talked about, has this new series that I think is really cool called Detective View. I think it's a fascinating concept. I think it's a really cool concept. And it feels like a mix of like late 90s, early 2000s detective computer games like, Detective Barbie, I Spy a little bit, things in that vein. Kind of mixed with Death and Other Details. And so right now there are 2 episodes currently up on her channel. And as always, I will link her channel and both episodes down below. But in episode 1, we learn that the patriarch of the Teller family, who is also the CEO and founder of this jewelry company, has been unalived. And so we start out by swabbing the teacup for evidence, and we are introduced to this whole cavalcade of characters who comprise his children and people who work with the family and work among the household. And these are all, by the way, BB Key does different makeup and costumes. Every character, except for, I don't think she's Silas, but I may be wrong. But she does these different looks and outfits for every character. It's so nifty. So we get an initial statement from each suspect, and we learn from Silas's son, Simon, that he was about to retire. And so, there's definitely a little bit more of information we learn about our parade of characters. There's his son, Simon, there's the family lawyer, there's the maid, and then there's his daughter, Elizabeth. And so the video ends by asking who we'd like to interview first. And I, as someone who just joined the 21st century and got a TikTok a few days ago, I'm not sure if BB Key is putting up a poll. I watched these on YouTube because that's just my preferred platform. I know I'm 31 going on 47, but I'm pretty sure what BB Key is doing is taking input from the comment section, and I don't know if there's a poll on TikTok, and she's creating the story like it's an interactive element, like we're dictating the story. So the video ends by asking us who we'd like to interview first. So then in episode 2, we learned that Simon was selected as the first interview. But as we're reaching the manor, we see a strange hooded figure in the woods, and our narrator, who seems to, I'm not sure how exactly they're related to the story, if they're just a narrator or if they're an actual like character being type deal. They tell us like, let the figure go, let's just get inside and interview Simon first. So as we walk in and approach Simon for the interview, we interrupt him on a call where it, to me, alludes to the fact that he will be taking over the company, and then he begins to call into question someone's loyalty over the phone in response to knowing Simon will be the one taking over. So Simon apologizes and says it was a business call, and he asks if we've gotten anywhere with his father's case, and we ask about his relationship. He's earnest, and he says they didn't always have the best relationship, that he had some issues when he was younger. However, like, his father, they allude to the fact that his father got him cleared from some things, and he's kind of gotten it together, and their relationship was repaired, and that things were a lot better between the two of them before he was unalived. And we ask him for his alibi. He says he was at home, but that he's more than happy to provide us with surveillance footage from his house, because there's a camera outside that will show him just leaving the house when he got the news about his father. As we're leaving our interview with Simon, we run into Elizabeth, who is Silas's other daughter, and we learn that documents have been stolen from Silas's safe. So then we're left with a choice to either continue questioning suspects, to investigate the missing documents, to leave with Simon to go get the surveillance footage, or to find out who the mysterious person in the woods is. I personally vote for, I want to know who the figure in the woods is, because I think that they probably saw something, but we will see how episode 3 unfolds. And again, I think this is such a cool idea. I can't wait to see how this plays out. And BB Key, I think you make wonderful content. So next up, let's talk about, Barry actually left us a very nice comment on one of our videos, I believe when we covered the Project Earth finale. And so just thank you, Barry, so much. And in that comment, he did mention that they were going to start uploading like produced and narrated versions of the Locked Below comic series, that if you frequented the Project Earth site, you saw that several issues were released. And so the first one is out. And so in chapter 1, we learned that our Barry character is responsible for writing the same story 24 hours. He's basically locked in the dungeon of what we can infer to be Terra Nova. And it's the same story about Scarlet and Henry and Derek, where Henry has to save Scarlet from Derek, and he unalives him, and it's just the same story over and over. And at the end of this video, Barry receives a very mysterious phone call. And I think these comics are so cool because I think they add a layer to the already masterfully crafted series and story of Project Earth. And so I'm really excited to see these come to life on the channel. And I think that it's very cool. I will link Barry's channel below, this video below, and also the website given at the end of the video where all of the comics are hosted. So if you want to read ahead or just read along while this series is ongoing, you can definitely check those out. So the last thing I have up in special features is something I'm very intrigued by. So Loie Lane recently covered this on her channel, and again, my interest was so piqued by this premise, and I thought I would mention it here. I don't have much commentary to add outside of what Loie already did in her video. I highly recommend checking out her video because she does an excellent job of covering everything we know so far. Excuse me. Oh, that was so gross. I'm so sorry. And I would also subscribe to her channel if you haven't on YouTube. I obviously, I don't know her at all, but I love her content, and I just would definitely recommend if you are a fan of horror TikToks, urban legends, scary stories, and just also some really awesome plus-size body positive content, I would highly recommend subscribing to Loey Lane. But anyway, let's get into the Children of the Woods, because this is crazy, and I'm very intrigued by this. So, even though I just got a TikTok a few days ago, through Loey Lane's videos, I've become familiar with Morg Hauntings on TikTok. She's Morgan on YouTube, and I'll link both below. And she's just a horror creator. She reads horror stories. She talks about her experiences with the paranormal. She's very, very, very cool. So, Morg made this video where she was allegedly DM'd on Instagram by an account called the Children of the Woods, saying they thought that Morgan could help them. And so Morgan did some research and found their TikTok account, which consists of some cryptic videos that appear to be found footage in nature. There's some woods. There's a picture of a hooded figure that was allegedly taken back in the 70s. And so she interacts some with this account, and she gets sent coordinates and is specifically told to come alone to this specific location to get some tapes, information, so on and so forth. However, Morg naturally brought her husband because no. And they made their way through the forest, and they're kind of led by these spray-painted upside-down red crosses, and the deeper they get in, the fresher the paint seems to be. They start during the day, but it soon becomes night, and as they get to the last spray-painted cross, they turn and look, and there are some hooded figures with pitchforks, with torches, oy vey, wrong thing, with torches, and they seem to start heading towards Morg and her husband, who obviously run out of the forest and fortunately make it back to safety. And so Morg then tells us that they've been kind of threatening and told her that that's why she should have come alone, she didn't follow instructions, and they also send her mother's address and talk about going to visit her mom. And so before I go any further, these videos are tagged as analog horror on TikTok, so this is clearly the beginning of some sort of analog horror experience or series. As of now, the Children of the Woods account has 14 videos on TikTok, most of which mention some iteration and just reiterate the truth being in the woods. And there are a couple pinned videos at the top of their account that give us more context. And so the context for the Children of the Woods is that apparently a group of campers went missing back in 1999, and there are rumors of them being abducted by a cult that no one remembers / no one is willing to talk about. Additionally, investigators seem to find the camcorder from the group shortly after the disappearances. So we know so far there's apparently a Steam game coming at the end of the month, which if I can't find a playthrough for it, we know I'm not a gamer girly, but I'm willing to buy it and play it, because it's allegedly going to reveal how they found the footage. And I'm just, this is so fascinating to me that I will play it and I will report back if I can't find a playthrough. There's also something coming from them on 12/26/14, which is just a few days from now, obviously. And it's unclear to me if it's the Steam game or if it's the documentary mentioned in one of the pinned videos. I think we all know I love the Blair Witch Project. This reeks of the Blair Witch Project in the best way, not in a bad way at all. I love this concept. I agree with Loey Lane, just having watched a lot of Morg's content, I don't think she would get involved in this unless it was really, really good. And so we will definitely keep our eyes on this as it unfolds, because I'm very excited. I think that this has the potential to be really, really, really cool, and I'm very excited. So the last thing I have up for us today are our subtitles, which are just little tidbits and snippets of pop culture news from this week, and usually a little before this week, but I just think it's fun to talk about. So first up, the release date for the final season of The Umbrella Academy has been announced. Our Umbrellas will be taking their last journey on August 8th. Very excited. I love this series, and I can't wait to see how everything ends. The trailer for Sting has been released. I'm honestly stoked. I think it looks kind of like I think it looks kind of like Home Alone meets Arachnophobia. I'm pumped for it. I think it's going to be very good. It's definitely on my list. It will be out in April. The trailer for the Badlands movie has officially dropped. Again, I'm not a gamer girly, but I'm excited. I think it looks really good. I think at worst it's going to be a good popcorn movie. So I'm excited about that. We don't have a date on it yet, but it is coming soon. In sad news, Amazon has announced that they will be shutting down Freevee. A lot of the shows have already been moved to Amazon Prime, but with, the new paying for ads deal, Freevee will unfortunately be shut down. And then the last thing I have up is the Crow remake starring Bill Skarsgård will be flying into theaters on June 7th. And it is replacing, I know that the John Wick spinoff Ballerina has been pushed to next year, so the Crow is kind of like absorbing that spot. So, yeah, I think that's all we have for today. So I think it's time to just wrap it all up. Like I said, everything will be linked below. The pieces we talked about, the channels, the videos, everything in that vein will be in the description box for all of you. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Lisa_Frankenstein_, which we all know I love that movie. I've seen it twice. But just to reiterate, that was my handle years before this movie came out. I digress. Be sure to follow Elliot on Instagram at reading.with.read. The first the B Movies book club title has been announced, which is Dark Matter. I just read it. Elliot's read it. There's a series coming out. So just keep your eyes peeled on Elliot's Instagram as well as our Instagram at bmovies channel for more info about that coming up. Be sure to subscribe to the B Movies blog, just bmovies.blog, to get pieces sent directly to your inbox every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. CST. And be sure to subscribe to us if you aren't subscribed. We drop brand new videos every single Friday at 2 p.m. CST. Give us a like if you feel so inclined. Leave a comment if you want to chat. And I think that will do us for today. So all that's left to do is fade to black.